Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This afternoon's presentation is by Chris Tisdale from the University of New South Wales. And the topic to be presented is an applied e-mentoring model for academic development, reflection, and growth. And so I will turn off my camera and my microphone. And Chris has said that he's happy to take questions as we go along. So feel free to ask your questions either in the chat, or if you want to turn on your camera and turn on your microphone, you can do that as well. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Katrina. So I'm coming at you today from Sydney in New South Wales, in Australia. And I'm at the University of New South Wales, and this is like a large state university. We have about 60,000 students, so it's quite a large organisation. So let me share my screen with you. Let's see if that comes up. Today's presentation is about e-mentoring, and I guess it's never been more timely with all the COVID and lockdown and all these sorts of things. So I'm going to share a story about e-mentoring, and there's a little bit of theory, there's a little bit of practice, but what I'm really hoping to do is to really get your feedback or some of your stories. So I won't talk for very long. So this is joint work between myself and Raj Shekhawat, who's now at Flinders University. Okay, so I think we've all had a mentor at some point in our lives. Maybe we've also been mentors, but why is mentoring important? Well, I'm glad you asked. I think we all would recognize that mentoring brings about positive outcomes for the mentees, for the mentors, and also for their institutions. Now, of course, it's more than just about outcomes. We're interested in processes as well. But I mean, these are some of the benefits, I guess, that people identify in the literature about mentoring. So what about the E? So I think as we go on, the e-mentoring is just going to become mentoring, right? We've spent the last couple of years really being online a lot with our teaching and all sorts of ways of working, but I think the E is going to fall off eventually. Many people define e-mentoring in many ways, but the way that we define it is it's a relationship where you use technology to enable a more experienced person to act as a guide or a role model, a teacher, or a sponsor of the less experienced person, the mentee. So in this relationship, this is Raj on the left, and he was the mentee, and that's me on the right, a few years younger than I am now, and I was the mentor, the e-mentor, I guess, in this situation. Okay. Thank you, Christina. Yeah, great image for mentoring. That was actually, since you've made a comment, thank you very much. That was actually the first time that I met Raj. That was in Sydney. So I'm going to share a few things about what we did and how we did it, and some things that we learned. Okay. So Raj was at that point in New Zealand. Okay, he was at the University of Auckland, and he was quite a young, I would call him an early career researcher. And the way that we actually connected was through HERDSA, a HERDSA fellowship, which is abbreviated to FHERDSA. Now, HERDSA is the Higher Education Research and Development Society of Australasia. So it's a real mouthful, but essentially they're the peak body in Australia, at least, for higher education research and development. Okay, and they have this FHERDSA, this fellowship, and the idea is to develop a reflective practice through a portfolio, and it's a 2-year process from start to finish. Raj, the mentee, was in Auckland, and I was in Sydney. Now, even though Australia and New Zealand have many things in common, they're still a long way away. So they're not really just around the corner. A flight to Auckland from Sydney is 3 hours, and there's no tunnel or or anything like that yet. Okay, thank you, Katrina, for putting that in the link in the in the chat. Anyone who wants to have some more information about FHERTZ, go and click. So what did we do? Well, we had meetings, and they were done via I think it was Google Hangouts, right? And what we did was we started just having the meetings, and then we forgot. So we'd have the first meeting, and then we'd forget by the second meeting what we'd actually said. So we had to go over all this ground again and again and again. So we thought, well, why don't we just record everything, and we can make a little archive out of it. So that's what we did. And so we would meet every couple of weeks, probably on average once a month. And over 18 months, we put this library together of all of our meetings. We also wanted to link this with a theory, because once we started doing it, we're like, well, okay, is there a theory that we can wrap this in or connect it with or anchor it with? Okay, and we also transferred the model, which I'll show you in a minute, to other situations, not just the FHERTZ stuff, but other things about, development and growth. All right, so here is some of the videos that we put together, and they're sort of about 20 minutes, maybe on average they're about 20 minutes. We only recorded what we really wanted to record, what was necessary, and we just made a playlist out of them. Okay, so you can see 19 videos. They're not public, but they're just something private between myself and Raj. Okay, all right. And so what we thought some of the benefits in doing this was, well, we had a nice memory to look back on, but also it helped us both with reflection. Having these archives of the conversation meant that we could both go back to the recordings and revisit them and think about them and reflect on them. So we thought that was very powerful. Now, this doesn't seem very innovative now because we're all doing Zoom meetings and all this sort of stuff, but this was 3 or 4 years ago, so it probably wasn't as popular back then. So here's some of the theory. This is grounded in Kolb's one of Kolb's cycles. So from a theoretical point of view, the following model kind of discusses the 3 or 4 stages of the process, right? So we have a meeting, we record it. Oh, that's my terrible R. So we record it, and what we have then is an archived recording of the meeting, which we then watch back, and that helps us reflect and prepare for the next meeting. Okay, so you've got this sort of spiral of reflection and growth, I guess. All right, so like I said, this is linked with Kolb's cycle. We thought we'd put in an acronym just because they're very popular and easy to remember, but this one doesn't really roll off the tongue. The first step was to have a discussion, okay, and hopefully during that you're reflecting in action. So you're reflecting as you go along, but it's harder to do. You record the session and archive it. That creates an artifact for reflection on action. So you finish the meeting, you want to think about what you've done. Okay, so you reflect, and then you can prepare for the next meeting, prepare for new action. So that's very similar to Kolb's learning cycle from a theoretical point of view, and we thought that was kind of interesting. So what were some of the benefits in what we were doing? Well, we had a shareable artifact. We could talk about it. We could look back on it. I still have copies of these things 3 or 4 years later. It was suitable for reflection. Now, I'm sure everybody here has been to those meetings where you feel great after you've finished the meeting, and then 2 days later, you can't even remember what you discussed, or you can't remember the details. It meant we had an accurate representation. So I'm not a very my memory is not great, okay? So I forget a lot of things. And so having this sort of accurate representation is great. Even if you take notes during meetings, they're still not entirely accurate, right? We also felt there were low barriers to entry. All you had to do was set up the video chat and press record. That was it, okay? So what were some of the effects or the learnings? Well, here's a few. They're mostly about Raj here. They're not about me, but I can also talk about myself. Christina said, "Oh yes, I know the feeling of not remembering what was said." Yes, I agree. I agree. You know, there's this famous curve, Christina, called the forgetting curve. Okay, and this is like the amount of remembering, and this is time, right? And so as you go on, you remember less and less and less. Okay, it's the forgetting curve. So what were some of the outcomes for the mentee? Well, Raj is an amazing academic, and he was a really easy person to mentor. He won an early career teaching award. He applied for promotion and he got that. He became a fellow of HRSA, and he's now a professor. He's a full professor. So you know, he's an amazing person. Now, of course, mentees are not always like Raj, and so mentors as well. I remember 5 years ago having a really terrible mentor. I asked the person, "Would you mentor me?" And they said yes, when they really should have said no, because they didn't have time. They didn't have time for anything, right? So I think that's one of the most important things with mentoring or being a mentee. You have to have time. I think that's so important. All right, so I'm getting to the end of the talk now. I told you that I would work on a 50% rule, so I'm going to talk for less than 50% of the time. So what I did, to summarise, was I would say it was a meaningful e-mentoring relationship was developed using technology. We linked the theory, the practice with theory, and the mentee, Raj, had some pretty important outcomes in his career. And what I hope is that to actually have a discussion about some of the ways that you mentor, or you are a mentee, or if you've ever been a mentee or been a mentor, how have you done it, and what do you think as some of the challenges or the enablers? Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to type in a link to the paper. Let me just put this into my thing, because I want to put this in the chat. Yeah, here it is. So I'll just put this in the chat now, and I'll see if I can come back. So if you want to have a look at a paper about this where there's lots more detail, here is a place where you can freely download it. But I think that's enough from me, right? I don't want to keep talking all the time. So what I might do, I might just go back to my big fat head and invite people to talk about mentoring. What are you doing, or what's happening at your university, or what questions might you have? Let me know. Feel free to turn on your microphones or cameras, okay? Because the 50% rule is finished. So let me know what's going on.
Thanks, Chris. I really enjoyed that talk. Full disclosure, I'm part of the HRSA executive, and the fellowship sits in my portfolio. But I know a bit about it, but I do wondering, and I've gone through a similar experience recently with the fellowship, and it was with people from New Zealand, Melbourne, New South Wales, and Perth. And we also thought it worked really well. But I wondered if part of the reason that it worked so well is because of the framework of the fellowship. And whereas sometimes when you engage in a mentoring relationship, it is that ongoing mentoring that may be, and I don't know, but may be more suitable to catching up for coffees with somebody on campus, or having that regular sort of touch point because you know each other in a different way. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, it's a super interesting question, Katrina. Thank you. There's lots of different ways to mentor. I think you're right, and I think, like I hinted at before, it takes time, right? Like, and this is a bit different. So, for example, I look at a lot of draft promotion applications over the years, and I give feedback, right? That's a very short period of time. Whereas with the Hertzer Fellowship, you're looking at a year, 18 months, maybe even 2 years in some situations. And as long as you're meeting regularly and you're devoting that time and energy, the relationship really blossoms. So the framework and the timeline really helps with that. I know there are some fellowships you can write the application overnight and submit it the next day. You're not going to get a lot of growth in one night. You'd have to be a Superman or Superwoman to do that, I guess. So I think that the time frame is long, but there are lots and lots of rewards. Does that make sense?
Sorry, just muting and unmuting. Yes, absolutely. I just often wonder, because our situation was also very successful, but I do wonder if sometimes having that framework, like you said, and I don't know the circumstances around it, but somebody had said they would be your mentor but really didn't have that time. I feel like having something that you're mentoring on that kind of does require that lengthy time to commit to also requires some accountability.
Yeah, agree. I mean, I'll give you an example. I remember I had a mentor in a different situation where this person had no time, clearly, but they said yes. And they were in Australia, and they took off to Singapore. I didn't even hear from them again. So that like it took someone else to tell me that they were leaving. So anyway. Christina, I'm just looking on the chat. You've got a question. Do you want to turn your microphone on, Christina, and just have a chat? Don't be shy.
Okay, so my question is about your experience as a mentor, and how have you grown through these years of mentoring people, potentially if there were more than us, and what reflections you had about your practice? So what lessons did you learn?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you, Christina. I think with mentoring's a bit like coaching in some sense. And there's this reward of helping people, right? Like I see myself very much as a teacher. That's kind of why I exist professionally. And so I like helping people. And, I try to help my students and I try to help my family, but I also want to help my colleagues, because I became a full professor here maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and once you reach that top, you need to help other people get there as well. So that's why I did it. I think also my institution really values the mentoring, and you also get some career revitalization. You feel more alive in your career when you're helping people, because their success is my success. Mm-hmm. Does it make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
So have you been mentoring, or do you have have you been mentored, or tell me about what you're doing?
So I'm not officially a mentor, but I'm working at a university in the UK, Nottingham-Trent University, where we have a course, the postgraduate certificate in learning and teaching in higher education, which is for early career academics. And as part of the course, we group, let's say, or pair early career academics with experienced academics from their own discipline, so that they can mentor each other. And my contribution to that is to facilitate these mentoring relationships and being part of the training as well of the mentors. So it's interesting to see, for me, how the mentors develop, and you can see that as you get more mentees allocated to a mentor, and through the years of them being involved in the process, their mentoring approaches are improved as well. So I was wondering about your experience specifically. But as you say, a lot of people identify what you said, that the success of my mentee is my own success as well.
Yeah. Look, I agree. And I mean, I wouldn't say that about my students, I wouldn't say oh, if my students are successful, then I'm a successful teacher. But I think it's different from mentoring, right? So yeah, and it's hard. Like one thing that I think is really difficult is pairing the mentor and the mentee together, because sometimes the matches are not successful, you know. So I think that's a big challenge as well. Let me go to Shalini's question. Shalini, do you want to come on the microphone and tell us about your question? Don't be shy. Turn on your camera and say hello.
Okay, I will. Thanks, Chris. Firstly, thank you so much for the talk. It's really, really fascinating. So the question that I have is that I've become a mentor in a course. I mean, it's not one of my primary responsibilities, but, you know, I was asked whether I would, and I agreed. And so with all the content stuff that we need to get through, I'm quite happy and comfortable, and so are the mentees with all of that. But one of the things that the program coordinator asked was that we provide more emotional support to our mentees as well. And I feel like I don't have the background or the experience or the knowledge to properly engage with them on their emotional side of life, you know, not the content side. And so I was wondering if maybe you had any thoughts on how to do this. I've done some courses on this, or you know, what do you do?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. And my background is in sort of science and maths and things like this, which isn't particularly well known for being super emotional, right? So what I tried to do, I read some books on you know, emotional intelligence, communication, and also coaching as well. So I guess my bottom line when I was trying to be sort of supportive was be interested, and it's a balance between encouragement and also, I think, being realistic as well. So yeah, so I read. I don't think I'm an expert either, but yeah, like even just being supportive, I think is really important. I mean, I was giving, I was at a first aid course a couple of years ago, and I was talking about, well, how can I be more supportive to my students? And the first aid trainer said, look, when you encourage and support and show interest in someone, that is considered being applying some first aid in cases if people are really stressed or they don't know what to do. So my plan was to show support, be encouraging, be genuinely interested in people, and also read up on the topic. So develop myself as well. Does that kind of make sense, Shalini?
Definitely. It definitely makes sense. And perhaps what I need to do is read up a little bit more on coaching. I think that would help as well. My worry is that when I had attended a workshop on emotional intelligence a few years ago, it was about student at risk, you know, for emotional intelligence and all of that. And I was told that we should not tell students things like, it's going to be okay. And I didn't think that. I thought we can tell students that because it's about showing them support. But the facilitator said that we actually don't know they're going to be okay. So we're making a promise, in a sense, about something we don't know. Now, I'm worried that I might start making statements like that unintentionally, you know? So yeah, but thanks, Chris. That's helpful. I think I'll go and look up information on coaching.
Look, I agree. And I mean, you can still keep it on that similar level. Maybe the language is just a little bit different. So, I mean, you could say, instead of saying it'll be all right, you could say, I believe in you. You know, I mean, that's absolutely genuine and coming from you. You know what I mean? And you can control that. Yeah, and also I think just listening as well. I think sometimes I feel like I don't need to say anything. I just need to listen and you know, be supportive in that way. But definitely have a look at some books or some online resources. I mean, I'm actually quite, how can I put it? I get quite anxious in social situations. So I don't think I'm one of those natural people who just get along with other people, so I guess it's something that I've been working at.
Thanks, Chris. That's very helpful.
All right, we still got a few more minutes, everyone. Hit me up with your questions. Christina, did you have a question?
I don't know. I was just reflecting on what Shalini had just said, and I think I have 3 small children, and so I always relate it back to reading all the parenting books about what you should say and the growth mindset, and not punishing by rewards by Alfie Kohn and that kind of thing. But also, I think I wanted to say, Shalini, to really, and exactly what Chris just said. It takes time. And work on it. Nobody's perfect to start, but clearly you're very self-reflective. You've thought about what you've heard at that emotional intelligence workshop, and you've taken it on board and thinking about how to impact your own practice through that. So I just think that's really valuable to hear and to see how reflective you are, because I think I often as well don't put myself out there for mentoring because I think, oh, well, I don't know what to say. But like Chris has said, he's been working at it, and you just keep going. So it's really good. We do have 3 minutes left. If anyone has anything else, any other questions for Chris? Any other thoughts?
Look, I agree. And I mean, one question that I get quite often is, well, if I do mentoring, what do I need to stop? Like I'm not going to start anything new until I know I can stop something else. I guess the advice that I would have there is build it into your yearly performance reviews. Make sure it's valued somewhere, because if it does take quite a lot of time, you want to make sure that you actually get recognised and acknowledged for that. And I think that's helped me a lot, because I've really made it front and centre of performance yearly reviews and planning and all that sort of stuff. And if it's not part of your institution, maybe it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just curious. I know there's lots of opportunities in Australia, certainly even outside of our institutions. So you've mentioned HERDS. I know ASIN has mentoring and ISSOTL has mentoring. So we have a lot of higher education organizations that offer mentoring programs. And I'm wondering if there's anybody from anywhere else that has a similar thing. Maybe if mentoring isn't something that's valued in your own institution, if there's other organizations that you can join that have those opportunities.
Yeah, really good point. Really, and then you also get, you're out of the bubble as well. You're sort of in a different bubble, perhaps, and you're learning and growing with different perspectives and ideas. Totally agree.
Yeah. And sometimes I think that makes it easier, stepping away from the colleagues who know you and who you know. And sometimes that's very challenging, but can also provide a lot of insight into your own practice.
Yeah.
So we've come to time, and I think there's no other session in this room, but there are lots of other sessions on at the moment. So thank you so much, Chris. That was a really great presentation, and some really great discussions and reflections came out of that. So thank you again.